Hey, Paul, we are live.
Good morning.
Good morning. I directly invited Paul Hughes. So we are waiting a bit to let the people come in. Are you excited, Paul?
Absolutely. It's a beautiful day here in the far west of Ireland, on the edge of Europe.
On the edge of Europe. Where actually are you? Are you really in Ireland?
So there's a place called Westport, and we're just about 10 minutes drive along the Atlantic coast of Westport. And we have a mountain just behind us here that's called 𝐴 Patrick, and 𝐴 is the Gaelic for mountain. So it's the mountain of Patrick. And of course, St. Patrick was the Irish national saint. He was the man that brought Christianity to Ireland. And it's told that he spent many days on the top of this mountain, meditating, reflecting, before he came down and then was teaching more people. So this is a very special place. And still today, there are people that go on pilgrimage and they walk up the mountain of Patrick, and many of them do it in their bare feet. So it's quite significant.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Hey everyone. Welcome to this beautiful webinar about, where are we going to talk about, Paul? It's all about stories, of course, the power of stories and
storytelling.
How do we find our stories? So please use the chat. Use the chat where you're all coming from. It's a beautiful day here in Belgium, close to the border of Maastricht. My name is Maurice van der Kant, sitting here next to Paul Hughes in Ireland. I still remember the beautiful movie Braveheart, but that's Scotland, but there is an Irish guy who said it's my land. And happy to have you all here. We are about to begin in a minute.
It's nice
to see.
Tell me,
how does your place look like? Let me see. Yeah. A beautiful fireplace at the back.
So the fireplace in many traditions, including in the Irish tradition, is one where before TV and radio, we would have people gathered around the fireplace. And this was the place where stories were told, stories were shared, stories were developed. So there's something very special in the concept of storytelling with fire. And much of the work that I do is to help people find their inner fire. So there's a symbol that we can refer to when it comes to fire. And maybe we could discuss that as we go further today.
Yeah. I told you just 5 minutes before we went online. I always like to do it a little bit different. So we jumped together online, and maybe we can already use the chat. Maybe you have already some questions, and then we try to include them into a best storyline. So please use the chat function also for your questions. The only thing what you have to know when you don't hear us, or we don't hear you, but please, in the top of your screen, there is a reconnect button. Please use that. If that doesn't solve the problem, just close everything and link back again, and we will be happy to see you again. But I believe in the positivity, and it will all go perfect this time. Let us start, of course. Let us be back together. And Paul, always starting with a great question: who are you?
My name is Paul Hughes, and as an Irishman, I come from a long tradition of storytellers. I had the honor of living in Amsterdam for many years. So I spend my time between Ireland and Amsterdam. And one of the great things that I found about living in Amsterdam is the great stories and the heritage that's in that city and in the Dutch culture generally. And it's one where I connect personally because it's very much about innovation. And that goes back all the way across to the golden age of Holland and the work that was done there. So there's, for me, layers and layers and layers of deep stories, not only in Amsterdam and in the Dutch culture, but it's also from where my own roots are. So I resonate with that concept of innovation as a way of creating something new. And for me, stories are all about renewal. Renewal. Even the oldest stories in the world, when they're told correctly, are refreshing. So there's something about the timelessness of stories that become then timely. And that's the kind of two themes that I work with regularly in my work, which is what are the timeless patterns that we have, and then how do we apply them in a timely way? So the work I do is with individuals, is with organizations, and then it's with governments, all about finding a story, living the story, telling the story.
Yeah. My world, and as you know, consists of connecting and looking for purpose-driven speakers. And that's maybe the start of my life that follows me during my life. I like to do that with passion. What I see, of course, the last couple of years, that of course people are not happy anymore with what they do, and I really would like to focus on that from, okay, how can I find my own story? How can I live my life? And for most important at the moment is, okay, why is it now in this period, this year, that we all suffer the same problem? So much important to find our own story.
Beautiful question, and it's something that we're all experiencing in different ways. There's a global crisis happening right now, and a lot of the work I do has a starting point with language, the words that we use. Now, a story is all built around language. So I'm passionate about reflecting on language. And I've just said there's a global crisis. So if we take the word crisis and we look at the roots of the word crisis, crisis actually means a decision point. Or it is the point in which a disease turns for the better. So if we speak about a crisis or where we are in the world today, we're at a decision point. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I would like to offer to the viewers today is, what is the decision that they are going to make? What is the decision that you're going to make today to find your story, live your story, tell your story? It's a decision point. So what has happened across the world has now affected us individually. And there's a new awakening in the world of a global interconnection. Now, before this concept has already existed, however, we're now experiencing it. Mm-hmm. That global health now is our health. And therefore, there's an awakening of consciousness around the world for many of us. Now, for some people, it's just been a confirmation of what we've already held. And for other people, it's been very real and they've experienced it perhaps physically for the first time. Either way, now is the time to make the decision to find your story, live your story, tell your story.
Beautiful. And why now? And why not from... I have here two beautiful children, of course, and I only would love to have them follow their own passion, their own purpose, and live a great life.
So again, you know, it's interesting to speak about this from two dynamics, the timeless dynamic and the timely dynamic. The timeless dynamic is what are stories, why are they important, etc., across humanity. And the second one is timely, why is it important now? So let's just step out into the frame of timeless. Stories are the only thing that has moved the world. The only thing that has ever moved the world is a story. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, if you want people to act, they have to feel first, and then they act. If they don't have it within themselves, they're not fully aligned to the action that they're taking. So all great leaders, all great dynamics in society have all had a story that people are connected to and therefore moved to. And the way that this works, if we could go into many different levels today. We could also talk about why stories work. One of the key things that stories do is they create emotion. And if you want motion, if you want people to move, if you want people to act, they need to first have emotion. So if we talk in the large frame, first and foremost, the timeless frame of stories, we need stories to move, to act, to change the world. In fact, a lot of the work I do with individuals is for them to come to a decision point, for them to say, how do I change the world? And for me to change the world is simply 3 steps. You change your mind. By changing your mind, you change your actions. And by changing your actions, you change the world. So Gandhi would speak about be the change you want to see in the world. In other words, you start with yourself. And this is the timeless aspect, the timeless power of storytelling, which is it creates emotion, so we create motion. Now, that's the timeless stuff. Let's go back into the timely. We are at a crisis, a decision point. And we are called, all of us, to make a decision now that we're going back into things. Are we going back to business as usual or business as unusual? In other words, are we going to do things differently? And I hope that we're going to do things differently, because the old story that we were telling perhaps was not rich enough for the world we are now living in and the world we're moving to. So we can speak about storytelling in a timeless way or in a timely way, and they're both connected.
Yeah, and can you explain people? Of course, now we more people are living in the online world, having connections with maybe a lot of people they don't even know before this whole lockdown. How can we explain people what's the best start when you don't know how to find your own story?
So I work with patterns, principles, and practice. So patterns are the big picture. Patterns are the timeless things that have happened across time with stories. Patterns. Then I work with principles, and the principles come from those patterns. And the principles are not rules. Rules are fixed. Principles are fluid. And then I'll talk about practice. So there are the 3 things that I would like to speak about when we talk about how do we find our story. The first thing is to understand the patterns of storytelling. And the first pattern I'd like to offer you is the following. Here in Ireland, you had ancient Ireland. And ancient Ireland, there was 2 types of people that you longed to be. You wanted to be one of 2 people. One person was you wanted to be the king. And the other person you wanted to be was the poet. The king or the poet. You wanted to be the king because he ruled people. You wanted to be the poet because you moved people. Now, let me just put a little asterisk here. In ancient Ireland, there was as many queens as there were kings. So we could say queens as equally as we say kings. So you wanted to be the king or the queen because you ruled people, or you wanted to be the poet because you moved people. In today's society, and for the last many years, we've had too many kings and queens ruling us, metaphorically, as opposed to poets moving us. So the first pattern that I want to offer you on the big scale is we need more poets, more poetry in our stories than we do kings and queens in our poetry. So that's the first thing that I want to offer you, is to be the poet. That means that we talk about emotion and we talk about the use of language. So this is the first frame, the pattern.
Is it that you mean we must show each other more our feelings, how we really feel?
Absolutely, which brings us on to the second point, which is patterns. So, sorry, principles. So from the pattern of being the poet, there's a principle. And the principle is the following. I've traveled a lot in India, and it's one of those beautiful ancient cultures. And I once met a man who was a guru in India, and I asked him a number of questions. And one of the great things about these wise individuals is they have a great sense of humor and they laugh a lot. So they're very light in their being. And through conversation, he shared a great insight. And that was, he said, too many people come to him and ask him, how do I do something? And he said, not enough people come to him and ask, who should I be? And he's making the distinction that it is not about how do I do, but rather, who do I be? Now, we could have a whole conversation just around that principle. What I want to offer you here is, the pattern is, be the poet. The principle is, be, focus on the being, not on the doing and the how-to. This is the strategic mind. The strategic mind is the sequence, the how-to. Whereas the being is who, not how, it's who. So the principle that we want to work with in storytelling, personal storytelling, is to be. So we've got a pattern, which is be the poet. We've got a principle, which is focus on being, not on how to do. And now we move that into the practical level of practice. Patterns, principles, practice. And there are three things that we need to do, be, do, we're in practice. There are three things that I can share with you. Shall I share with you those now or in a moment? Because I have another story. Why storytelling is so important. The story you tell defines your world. The language you use defines your world. The stories we tell to ourselves and to each other is how we frame our world. We therefore need to be conscious of the stories we tell. And growing up here in Ireland, my first passion and my first path into the world was that of an artist. I was drawing. And the first thing that you learn when you learn to draw is you realize that drawing is not about making a mark. Drawing is learning to see. It's learning to look. It's learning to be aware. When you know how to see, you can then make marks and draw. So drawing is learning to see. And the first principle that I'm speaking about here, about language and this idea of being, is a consciousness of how we see the world. So the importance of stories is that they define our world. The story we tell ourselves defines our world. The stories we tell with each other defines our society. And I would call people now to revisit the stories we have in our society.
Yeah,
that's a part of the crisis point. That's part of the decision point.
So,
be the poet.
Yeah, Paul,
so,
I see connecting with this a lot of questions, of course, and I resonate that. Just for start with Eric has a question: how do we define a story? Just how make it very short and clean because plenty of questions now in the chat, and would love to answer.
Beautiful. Now remember, there's still 3 things that I want to give you on a practical level, right? So let's look at Eric's question. Beautiful question, Eric. And it's one of those questions that you have, such as, well, what is art? And we could consider it from different perspectives. Let me offer you one perspective on what is a story. A story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Or a story is an invitation, an offer, a promise. Or a story is a journey. Now, I could continue offering different perspectives on what is a story. In the context in which we're speaking about today, which is personal storytelling, I would like to bring it back and make it personal. And I'm giving you now a hint as to what is the first practical thing you need to do. A story is personal. And let me share with you the first practical step you need to take. The first thing we need to do to find our personal story is we need to go inward. Not outward, inward. The first journey of all great journeys is first and foremost an inner journey. If we go back to my experiences within India, for those of you who have traveled there, is a profoundly impactful sensory experience. It's overwhelming to a certain extent. And a friend of mine, when she was discussing with me her first experience with India, she said, India, first and foremost, is a journey inwards. So as she traveled outwards along the path of India, she was confronted regularly with the inner meaning of this. So even though we're on an outward journey, it's really about the inward journey. So the first practical thing we need to do when we're practicing storytelling is we need to go inward, not outward. And I'll give you the question that you need to ask in a moment for that. Whereas, do we have more questions from the audience?
My good old friend Harry, I spoke with him on Friday. I think a lot of people having that, of course. Finding your story is one, but how do you prevent yourself from being influenced by how other people think about your story? I think that there's a very important questions.
Yeah, absolutely. This is wonderful. Unfortunately, we're in a society where we are regularly bombarded with others' perspectives, and our social media culture is quite prevalent in that. So we can reflect on this and ask ourselves, how do we secure ourselves? How do we fortify ourselves to be our story and to live that? And that is why the first thing that I'm saying is that it's an inner journey, not an outward journey. So the inner journey is key. And when you have that, it's then that we go outwards. Now, this is our second practical step. So these are beautifully set up questions, Maurice. It's almost like the audience is guiding us through our 3 practical steps. The first step is inwards. It's an inner journey. The second step, once we have found that inner place, is then to go outwards. And the trick is, when we go outwards, it is not about asking what do others think, but rather how do we serve others? We are only moved when we are connected to something that is bigger than ourselves. So all the great stories are not about the individual hero, but about how that hero is then serving others. The great path is not your path, but how your path serves others. So the resilience that, first of all, the two-step resilience to answer Harry's question is, number one, start internal. And I'll give you the question that you need to ask for that in a moment. And the second thing that you do is when you go outwards, rather than asking ourselves, how do we position ourselves in the mind of our clients, which is a very strategic brand marketing orientated work. And I could speak about that work and the importance of that work. However, this is about personal stories. So the second step is what you do is you ask yourself, how do I serve others? And when you work with the concept of service, you become much more resilient towards what others think. You filter out a lot of the conversation, and then it only becomes this idea of reflecting on, am I serving to the best of my ability? Shall we get another question? Because there's 3 steps that I want to offer you practically, and 3 questions. Go ahead.
Maybe last question, Simone from Australia. Who do I need to be the change I want to see in the world?
Thank you. Thank you. What a beautiful question. Who do I need to be to see the change that you want to see in the world? Who do you need to be? You need to be yourself. And this is the most profound and immense and glorious journey that we are all on, to be ourselves. Now, Oscar Wilde, the great Irish wit and thinker and writer, said, you should be yourself because everybody else is already taken. So our journey is to be ourselves. And that is profound. And with something that is profound, it is complex yet simple. And that's the real conversation that we're having here. How do we make this complexity simple? And I'm trying to offer a principle and a pattern. The pattern is be the poet. Don't be the king or the queen, be the poet. Then the principle that I want to offer you is the being aspect, not the doing aspect. And the practice that we want to work with is we go inwards before we go outwards. And the third thing that we do is we need to live our story. We need to be it. We need to live it in our bodies and in our day-to-day actions. In the work that I do with corporations across the world, a lot of the work I do is I give keynote speeches within teams and within large corporates. And a lot of the work that I do with organizations around the world is helping them to live their story. And in fact, there's been some work that other storytellers do of where they talk about the difference between storytelling and story doing. And they start talking about how organizations need to be story doing. Well, for me, this is simply a misunderstanding of what a story is. Unless you are telling your story and living your story, it's not a story. These things come together, they're woven together intimately. And when you live your story, it feeds into the retelling of your story, which feeds into the doing of your story, and it's a beautiful cycle. Be the poet, not the king or the queen. Be, don't think about how to do, but rather be. And 3 steps in our practice. Go inwards before we go outwards. And as we go outwards, think about going onwards. And what I mean by onwards is that idea of living the story. Go inwards, go outwards, go onwards. The path continues on.
And it's in fact creating your own life story with the right people around you.
When you tell your story and you tell it in this way that's inwards, that's outward serving, and where you're acting and living it on a day-to-day basis, there is an attraction element that comes into your life. You will be most yourself.
Beautiful, beautiful. Step 3, Harry, 30 has to do with practice what you preach. That's
So there's a beautiful ancient concept such as the golden rule. Do what you say what you do. Treat others as you would like to be treated yourself. This kind of over and back flow and dynamic is what we're speaking about in the third part of practice. Live the story because you are the story. The story is not something that is out there. The story is something here that we move to out there. So we go inward before we go outward to serve, and we go onward in this living aspect. Our path from our Australian question here, thank you, beautiful question, is an onward going journey. Our path will always continue. We will continue to seek to be ourselves for our journey on this earth. It is the most profound and beautiful question that we will have. So remember, I want to offer you these 3 questions within the practice that we're going to do. So Maurice, tell me, what would you like to chat about now?
Well, maybe Mariska is joining us with the question, of course. Is it how can we combine our personal story with a professional story?
So, as I say, a lot of the work that I do within organizations and corporates around the world is that I help them with their story. So the first principle on this is you do not create a story. Instead, you find the story. This goes for individuals as it does for organizations, as it does with society. You do not create a story, you find the story. And once you find the story, we can then speak about creating the craftsmanship around it. Absolutely. First and foremost, we don't create a story, we find the story. So as we look at ourselves, we then have to ask ourselves, how do we relate to the work that we do in the organization and the world? When I work with corporates around the world, I always work on 3 levels. The first level is the individual who's working within the organization. What do they believe?
It's a
second level.
It's about a belief system then, Paul.
Oh, yeah. So absolutely. So the only thing that has moved the world is the story. Why? Because the story creates emotion, and emotion creates motion. Now, what is the emotion it's creating is belief. Belief. Now, for those of us who've ever felt true belief in something, you understand and you feel what truth is for you, and you act upon it. There's no questioning. It's pure, it's prime, it's close to us. So the first journey that we have is an inward journey. That's the individual, let's say, within an organization. The second part is then you work at the organizational level. And then the third part is when you look at how that organization serves the world. The individual, the organization, the world. And the mistake that many, many organizations make is they only talk about the organizational story. And they're challenged when the individual asks, who am I within this frame? And the second challenge that organizations have is they all too often talk about themselves rather than how they serve the world. Many organizations will begin to talk about how they serve the world. And when you challenge the language and you go a little bit deeper, often you find that it's on the surface, that it's not deep enough, and they're not truly serving the world. Mm-hmm. An individual, own meaning, connecting to the meaning of the organization, connecting to the meaning and how they serve the world. These 3 levels up, 3 levels coming back down. It's one of the beautiful dynamics that you work with as a storyteller, and when you live with stories, is that stories are fluid. They flow. The storytelling, the story doing, the storytelling, the story doing. It's all fluid. That's the timeless and the timely. The timeless, the timely. So there's a beautiful sense of dynamic and movement in storytelling.
Yeah, yeah. I think also that connects with a great question from Shane, also from Australia. In your opinion, what's the best way to serve and create positive change through your story?
Sorry, say that again. This question is from Shane.
Shane, also from Australia.
Hello, Shane.
In your opinion, what is the best way to serve and create positive change through your story?
Beautiful question. Create positive change through your story. Well, I think the first word that comes to mind is being authentic and being truthful, first to yourself. And again, I'm going to repeat myself quite a lot in what I'm saying here, because I work with patterns and I see the patterns that individuals use throughout the world, that organizations use throughout the world, the patterns of great storytellers. And I keep coming back to the patterns and the principles. And the key principle here that we're focusing on today in personal storytelling is the being. And we first and foremost need to be the story. It's not external, it's internal. So the authenticity, the truthfulness of what it takes to be that story, I feel, is the first stone that drops to create the ripples impacting the world. If you want to change the world, you begin by changing your mind, to change your actions, to change the world. 3 steps. Change your mind, change your actions, change the world. If you want to change your mind, you begin by changing your story. So be authentic in the story that you're living. That's the stone that drops, and then the ripples come outwards to impact the world.
Yeah, when you look at me, my journey actually started, I think, 21 years ago. After I finished my university degree, I thought I have to travel the world, not only looking for myself, but also how the world sees me. And it was a great journey where I meet so many beautiful people. And I found out that I really liked connecting in the stories with people. But then you come back and going back into that life again, well, and you struggle a bit. And then after, I think, another 20 years, you found that purpose again, what you found 20 years ago in Australia, in New Zealand, in Asia. And now I'm connecting the world online for several years already. And I wake up with a lot of energy. It makes me happy to introduce people from around the world with each other. It makes me happy with serving other people to make their happy, to answer their questions. And yeah, in fact, what you see, the problems are everywhere the same at the moment. The problems are everywhere the same. And we all have a story, but some we don't know yet. So it's still, is there easy steps to help them to really go deep?
So for you advanced listeners and viewers, I want to offer you a second principle that, Maurice, you've just reminded me about as I'm reflecting on what you're saying and listening to what's happening in this part of the conversation. One of the second principles to work with is the concept of reflect and connect. Reflect and connect. Reflect and connect. So The principle first that we're speaking about is this principle of being, not the how to do, but the path to the being. The second principle that we're now revealing here is this principle of reflect and connect. All great storytellers, all great stories, and where we find ourselves today in this crisis, this decision point, is we are reflecting first and foremost on ourselves and connecting with others. So reflect and connect is the dynamic that storytellers and stories call us to do. The great dynamic within storytelling is when you hear a story, you become the hero or the heroine. You place yourself within the story. You connect with it, and then you start reflecting on how does that make me feel. Mm-hmm. So the principle is to form a habit. Now, we could talk about micro habits. And a micro habit is where on a daily basis, we take a moment to reflect and connect with ourselves. As we go outwards, we reflect and connect with others, and then the world and society and so on. But this micro habit of reflect and connect is something that we could all form as a daily ritual and a daily habit. And because we've been brought into a smaller circle of dynamic in our own homes and in a closer dynamic, we are first called to reflect on ourselves and connect with ourselves, and then reflect and connect with others. And this is an ongoing flow and dynamic, as I would suggest. So the principle of being, rather than how to do, how to be, is also a principle of reflect and connect. It's dynamic, it's moving. Now, I still want to get into those 3 questions you need to ask in the practice side of things. Now, perhaps we can do that at the end as we move towards closing our conversation.
Yeah, I'm looking at the time, and would really love to show you something, Paul, and I would like to invite somebody else because life is a journey. Life is finding your purpose. You can start already with your children to show them their own life story. You connect with so many people who can help you finding your own purpose. But please keep to yourself. Let me see if it works. Let me see if it works. I would love to show you a video.
Wonderful.
Have a look. Hope it works. It's the first time.
If you want to change the world, change your story.
You put the camera off.
Why don't you let that sink in for a minute? Have you ever wondered what we're best at? What makes people people? It's storytelling. We're addicted to captivating, exciting, wonderful, engaging stories. It's what we do. Stories are the basis of human connection. It's in our DNA. It's what makes up our thoughts, our world, our economy, even our physical well-being. But we got a little lost along the way. Negativity and fear seem to be thriving in search of clicks and shares. Our normal way of storytelling slowly became mass media consumption, numbers, news, social overload.
I think people did not see it for some reason.
Perhaps that afterwards.
Yeah, let me hear in the chat. Maybe we will play it again later. Could you see the video, people?
By the way, there's some other great questions that I'm looking at here.
No, only audio. Okay, only audio. Okay, yeah. But let me invite Ian.
Okay.
We will share this video later to all the people, and I'm happy to invite him in this webinar. Maybe the microphone he's on, Ian? Yeah. Thank you for having you.
Happy to be here.
It's all digital, of course. Sorry that the video was not working, but we'll show it again. It's all about stories, of course, and about and we reconnected. Please tell me your story, Ian.
In short, I'll try. I like to call myself a visual storyteller, so I'm a filmmaker, but I was never educated as a filmmaker. I'm one of those people who, in an early stage of my life, followed a path of what was expected, or I thought was expected. So I studied economics without really knowing why. And a theme that came back in my life every time was adventure. And adventure, not so much in the sense of travel only, but because the essence of adventure, I think, is doing something that is new, something that you experience, something that you haven't experienced before, and this provokes emotion. You know, you can be in a new adventure, a new experience. You can be very happy, but it could also bring fear or anxiety, and it brings emotions, and strong emotions change your being, or and yourself. So the first, I think, a pivotal moment for me was when a good friend of mine took me sailing to France for the first time. I was in my early 20s, and he was a sailor, and he said, "Let's go to France with a couple of friends." And I had never been on a sailboat in my life. I think I have a picture of me as a kid in a sailboat. I can't remember anything. So this whole experience was brand new to me. And we sailed to France. And a sailboat, I realized very quickly, was like a floating camper van. You have your kitchen, you have your beds, and you have your way of transport. And we ended up in France without even noticing of crossing any kind of borders. And this was pivotal to me because from that moment on, me and that friend started saving money for 4 or 5 years, like not going out for dinner. We just wanted to make a very big trip on a sailing boat. And 5 years later, we had gathered the money and we left. We sailed around the world for 2 years. We collaborated with a bunch of NGOs like the World Wildlife Fund, Sea Shepherd, the Red Cross, to visit all kinds of projects related to ocean climate. And 2 years later, we came back. We had filmed our journey, and we ended up making an 8-part documentary series from the trip. And the thing is that we've gone through so many new experiences on that trip. I mean, every day I would do something new, but one of the biggest things was filmmaking to me, because we made this documentary, and for me that was like a spark. It sparked something in my mind that was there in my teenage years. I had always been walking around with a camera, but no one had ever told me that it could be a job or a career. And from the moment I came back, I literally just bought a camera with one lens and started filming. And that was my film school. So for the first few years, I just learned how to use a camera. And at this moment of my life, I think I've gathered the whole skill set of knowing how that works and knowing how to tell stories by film. And now is the time where I tell these stories, not just my own story of sailing, but tell stories of others to engage people and spark their own kind of adventure in a way.
So yeah. In fact, maybe we can join now with the three of us. Yes. In fact, what you now share, Ian, with your company 𝐏𝐶 Films, is there was a moment in your life that you already know that was your purpose, but you discovered many years later that it was, and it had to be that struggle journey on a sailboat that you may decide from, well, I only want to do this every day, again and again.
Yeah, and the same thing, because it's a lot of people, when they find a passion or they find something they would like to do, they see all kinds of barriers on their road. They see, I can't do this, I couldn't film, so I could have said the same thing. You know, I don't know how to film, I didn't have film school, I don't have money for equipment. There's always so many reasons why you shouldn't do something, or why you can't do something. But if you, the only, like Casey Neistat, one of my heroes, once said, the only thing between you and doing everything you've ever wanted to do is doing it. It's just start. So there's really no reason to not start.
And you now say money thing. I think that's a fear of loads of people at the moment. Is a reason how we get Paul, how we get lose that fear of thinking, okay, we need to earn money because otherwise, Paul.
Yeah. So it's great, by the way, Arjen, you speaking about your personal journey there, and I love the concept of it literally being a journey, which is quite remarkable. And you've seen the world, you've experienced it, so that's remarkable. And I think the metaphor of a journey is a very powerful one that we can bring back into how we feel about money. And you know, it's quite interesting. There's two crises at least that has taken place in the world today: the crisis of health and the crisis of wealth. And we haven't fully yet experienced globally the crisis of wealth and the impact that this health crisis is going to have on the wealth crisis. And we definitely need resilience and help towards each other in the coming months and in the coming years as we move into this wealth crisis. So the concept of being on a journey and our concept of our relationship to money is a very important thing for us to bring to the surface of our conversations and the surface of our story. And one of the first things that comes from a reflection on this is you use the word fear. And again, I listen to words and I ask myself, well, what is the meaning of these words? What does fear mean? Well, the root of the word fear means revere. And to revere something means you respect it. You have a relationship with it that is a respectful relationship. And I think if we considered our relationship with money as being one of respect, we might consider how we behave differently in the world and how we can be respectful of the money we have and how we spend money and so on. And that's part of this reflection and connection that we're all experiencing in these moments of decision that we're experiencing today.
As I told you, of course, Paul, life is a journey. We met a couple of years ago, and also Arjen and I met last year, and we used this lockdown to really show the world what our shared story is. And it resonates, of course, with my community, 𝐏𝐚𝐭 It's not about speaking business or event business. It's about what us all connects. We humans are connected through stories, and we must use our life to share our own stories and to add value to the world, to add value to people, to add value to society, and even what you are saying, serve other people, because that makes every human makes it happy.
Yeah, that idea of human to human is what we're all connected with. And I think do
you have something on your microphone? Because your microphone is, for me,
Is this better?
Oh, much better.
There we go. So the voice has come back. So I think there's something very interesting about this idea of human to human, heart to heart, that we're all resonating and all longing for at this time. And as a professional keynote speaker working within the industry of speaking, there are many things that are positive and constructive in the industry, and there are many things that we need to revisit and challenge. And I think the things that we're all resonating with within the industry and within the world is a human to human, purpose-driven approach. And one thing we could reflect on is, where can we get guidance for that. And when we say human to human, we need to put a little asterisk on human and understand that human does not mean we're separated from nature, which is one of the great narratives and stories that's taking place in the world today, which is we've been destroying the planet because we haven't been respectful for it. So instead, we need to be part of that story. So when we speak about human to human, we're actually speaking about nature to nature. And when I heard Arjen, there's two words. Again, I listen to words. And Arjen, you said two words that were, for me, very significant. The first thing that you were saying was that you studied economics. And then when you went and you traveled, and when you went and you traveled the world, you were working with NGOs and you were thinking about the ecology of things, right? Well, the word economics and ecology has the same root. Both of them have eco in it. And eco means home. So economy means home management. And ecology means home knowledge. And if you consider these both of these things together and how you could weave these into home management and home knowledge, then we could have this way of working together on a human to human, nature to nature story. So it's beautiful. I love this idea where the economist goes into the ecology. Beautiful.
Yeah, but the funny thing is I don't stand very negative towards the economy, because I think there's many things I learned that we can use to create a better world. I think we have to just look at how we use it.
Yeah. For sure. And I just want to point out, sorry, one of the questions that came in here from Dominique, well, she's more of a statement, which was that we shouldn't assume that people aren't happy these days. Mm-hmm. And I want to pick up on that because I feel that that's very true. And what we want to really do is we want to...
I also saw a statement in the beginning of Dominique. I did not make an assumption. It's just statistic that about 70% is unhappy with what they do in their job. That's okay. It's not my assumption. So that's the translation. So go on, please.
Sure. Well, what I love about what she's referring to here is this concept of happiness. And one of the words that, again, I'm reflecting on is happiness. And happiness literally comes from the root mean to be lucky, which is interesting. I work with the concept rather of joyfulness rather than happiness. Yeah. Happiness all too often is surface and is trivial. And life is not surface or trivial, as we all know. Life is deep. Life is often painful. Life often has suffering with it. And I feel that the word joyfulness encompasses that. So you can be joyful through a suffering because it's enriching you. And I love this idea where deep storytelling and to be ourselves means that we're joyful. And I feel more and more people, as Dominique is suggesting in this time, have become joyful. Not necessarily happy, as I would describe it, but joyful. There's a simplicity of life that we're connecting to.
Yeah, I very strongly feel that. I think that this also has to do with what we transcend and what we share is to find things not just in yourself but in the world that give you joy and to spread those stories, because that the video wasn't working as well, but there's a point in there that there's actually a call to people to see and find if you can find stories or find examples of people or things that inspire you and spread those messages, because ultimately that's what you also said, Paul. It's the stories that create your world. It even works on an individual level. I think if you think positive and if you do that as a mindset, that's what become your thoughts, and your thoughts become your conditioning. Your conditioning ultimately becomes your own world.
Your story is your world in that sense. Exactly. Yeah,
and in essence, that's also what we need to. That's if you want the world to change, I think we need to think about what we post online or what we tell other people, and try to ultimately be positive in that sense, because that's what comes back to you.
Yeah,
For sure.
We know, of course, what we see now at the moment, that those movements, there are more movements coming up in the world, spreading the positivity, spreading to be who you really are, making a joyful life, of course. We are now at 60 minutes, Paul, and we would love to. I asked you there are loads of questions in the chat, so please, Paul, please answer them. We will send them to you and answer them in an email. We are happy to do that. But last couple of takeaways for the people, because we can talk about this topic many times. Maybe we'll do it next month again. So let me know, what can you share the attendees, the people who joined us, and how can they take action today?
For sure. I'm very happy to answer any further questions, as you say, offline and so on. There's principles, above principles, patterns, beneath principles, practice. That's what we're speaking about today. And it's all about personal storytelling. The pattern that we're dealing with is a call for us to use this decision point to be the poet, not the king or the queen. Don't rule people, move people.
Mm-hmm.
That's the principle. That's the pattern. The principle that comes from this is this idea of be, don't seek how to, just simply be. And the practice that comes from this are 3 steps. The first step is we go inwards before we go outwards, before we go onwards. And there's 3 questions. The first question that you ask to go inwards is, when am I most myself?
Beautiful, yeah.
This is the equivalent of dance like nobody's watching. When am I most myself? That is the inward journey. Reflect and connect on that. The second part of the journey, inward journey, outward journey. The second question that we ask on the outward journey is, how am I serving others? How am I serving others? We're only moved when we're connected to something greater than ourselves. And the third part, when we go inwards, we then go outwards, then we need to go onwards. And that is, how am I living my story? These are the 3 questions. When am I most myself? How am I serving others? How am I living my story? And I hope that when we reflect and connect on these, we're going to find that fire within us that becomes more of a poet. And that's the decision point that I'm offering for our viewers today.
Beautiful. I guess we never end with a video, but I still would love to show the people the video. So let's try it again, because live is also to make mistakes and learn from it.
Exactly.
If it's not working, we try do it again. We stand up and do it again, over and over. We never give up. I think we never give up. Commit to your own life story. Let other people help you if you cannot do it alone. We found our own life story. You found your life story. You find your purpose, Paul. You did, Arjen. I did. Let's make it a joyful life. Let's see if we can make it.
Wonderful.
Again.
No, it's all right.
No.
We can share the link though, maybe.
If you want to change the world, change your story. Why don't you let that sink in for
Can you see it?
No, doesn't work.
No.
Have you ever wondered what
Playback on other websites has been disabled by the video on it, so.
it's storytelling? We're addicted to captivating, exciting, wonderful.
So
You
it's
see it?
no, you cannot see it. I only can see it, so I'm enjoying myself with my video.
We
So
can
we
share the
will-
link. There's
we will
a
share the
link in
link.
the chat and email.
We will share the link in an email to all of you. Let me know. Give me your feedback. React to everything. Spread positivity. Spread purpose. Love to have you here, Paul. Thank you, Ian. We will meet again on Thursday. On the digital day, the Dutch digital day, and we have also connected Australia with Tasmania and Australia with, on the other side, Los Angeles, USA, in our webinar when Obama meets Lion. Very unique moment of also two great life stories. So happy to have you there on Thursday in the afternoon Dutch time. So thank you everyone joining us. Hope to see you back again. Okay, bye bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye bye.
Yeah.